Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Rodri and this is Everything Wealth. Today we're going to be talking about property. We're going to be talking about three main strategies that people are using to get involved in property. The three strategies that we're going to be talking about are property sourcing, rent to rents, and lease options. These three strategies are really popular at the moment because they don't require a large amount of capital to get involved. I'm going to start with rent to rent as I've just started a business that uses this strategy to get involved in the market of property. The simplest way I could put it is you rent a property out and then you rent it to someone else for a larger amount and profit the difference. If you were going to do this over a standard rent agreement, which is an AST, assured short hold tenancy, then it is illegal as it's classified as subletting. But if you were to rent it as a company under a corporate let or a management agreement, then you can legally use this technique or strategy. Both these agreements require that you rent a property through a company, so you'd have to set up a company, but that's beneficial for you because you separate yourself from the company. So how would you go about renting a property and making profit from renting it out? Well, there are three main methods that are quite popular. There's the multi-let, HMO, and surface accommodation. Multi-let and HMO are really similar, the only real difference being the size. So a multi-let is usually a 3 or 4 bed, and then a HMO is a home of multiple occupancy is a slightly larger, so 5 plus. It depends on the council in the area that you're in as to what's classified as a HMO. If you do decide to go through the HMO route, you'd have to get proper HMO licensing. That's basically the only difference. You'd have to adhere to the same criteria, so fire doors, fire alarms, size of the room, a common area, and the number of bathrooms, depending on how many rooms there are. So how do you use HMO or multi-let to make yourself profit? Well, so say for example you rent a 4-bed property for £600 and then rent out each room as £400 each. You'd also have to pay for things like the utilities, internet, maintenance, and these sort of things, and that'll add to the cost, but you'd still be looking at around £600 a month profit. So secure a couple of these deals and you're instantly looking at £1,000 to £2,000 a month profit. Now a HMO requiring a license can create a couple more problems, but if you know what you're doing, it's not a huge issue. So you'd have to apply for a HMO license. Of course, if the property already has it, then you don't need to get one. Getting the license means that you can legally let out to more than 5 people, and some properties can go up to 10. It really depends on the size of the property. Recently, the UK has implemented something called Article 4 in a lot of areas to reduce the number of HMOs. It's sort of stopping it from oversaturating the market. So you'd have to double check on your area as to whether or not you can get a HMO license or if Article 4 is already implemented. One of the benefits of having a HMO licensed property in an Article 4 area is that because no other properties can get new licenses, that property is worth a lot more. That only applies for if you actually own the property. Service accommodation is the other method I'll talk about for rent to rent, and that's when you take on a property for a 3 to 5 year period roughly under a corporate or management agreement, and then you would post it onto a online travel agency such as Airbnb or Booking.com to attract corporate business people for short-term tenancies, or guests, holiday makers, or even families for short periods of time. It really depends on the location and your target audience. You could then supply them with cooking equipment, basic utensils, linen, cleaning, maybe even food if that's what you're going for. It would then be treated a lot like a hotel business in that after every guest, the accommodation would need to be cleaned. You'd have to make sure everything's stocked up. If you have a coffee for the guests, utensils need to be cleaned, bed sheets need to be cleaned. Any sort of damages that may have occurred may need to be repaired. As you can see, service accommodation is going to be a lot more hands-on. You require a cleaning service. You have to organize them to clean out the property after every guest. You have to make sure that you're constantly getting bookings. But if managed properly, this method can be more lucrative than HMOs or multi-lets. Say for example in my area on Airbnb you can get a room for £90 a night if you have a 100% occupancy, which isn't guaranteed. You usually want to aim for 70%, but if you get 100% occupancy, you're making about £1,500 profit a month, and that's at £90. The benefit with service accommodation is you can fluctuate your price depending on the season and if any events are going on. So you could rent it out for £150, £200 a night, and that could drastically shoot up your profits. So that's rent to rent. Another one I talked about is lease option. This is when you would find a landlord who is looking to sell quickly or is under distress. Maybe they're going through a divorce, or the property isn't theirs, it's a family member's, and they just want to get rid of it. Or perhaps the property is in disarray, so they can't sell it for the price they want to sell it for, and yet they can't afford to fix it before they sell it. There's lots of reasons that a landlord would agree to something like this. You'd basically put forward the idea that you can purchase the property anywhere between now and the next 10 years for a higher price than it's currently worth, and you agree at that point. You're taking a risk assuming that the property value will increase over a period of time. So say, for example, £110,000 the owner is asking £125,000 for, you offer £130,000 if he's willing to accept the money at a later date. You would then agree a rent price. Usually it would be enough to cover the mortgage and maybe a little bit more for the landlord, and you would take full responsibility to control the property until that time is up. So if you've agreed 10 years, then anywhere between 0 and 10 years you can buy it for £130,000. But if you don't want to, you don't have to, and you are paying that rent throughout the time. You could then use this technique and double it up with a rent to rent, or you could just rent it out as a whole property. There's lots of different options at that point once you've secured that lease option agreement. So this agreement only really works if both parties win. It wins for the landlord because they're struggling to get rid of it. It wins for you because you're looking for a property that you can make a profit with. As long as both parties are aware of what's intended, there's no issues with this agreement. It's not a new strategy. It's been around for a really long time, but more in the commercial area. It's starting to see a lot more traction in the residential area as well, so that's why it's talked about a lot more frequently. One of the ways you can look at it is sort of like a car finance deal. A lot of people pay a monthly for a car, and then at the end of the time they're given the chance to purchase the car or to switch it up for a new one. The only difference being that you can't trade it in, and you can purchase it at any point after you start driving it and up till your end of your agreement date. The other method I mentioned is property sourcing. Now this one's a little bit different to rent to rent and lease options, in that is less quote unquote passive. It's more you're paid for what you do. With rent to rent and lease options, once you secure a property and you've got it going, the systems are in place, it's generally a little bit more hands off. With property sourcing, it's a lot harder to get to that position. What it entails is you as the property sourcer would find great deals, below market value deals and these sort of things, and pass them on to investors for a fee. So the fee is set by the sourcer. It's generally between £1,000 to maybe even £5,000 depending on what type of deal it is. Is it a commercial to residential development? Is it a new build? Is it a below market value deal? Is it a rent to rent deal? Is it a lease option deal? There's lots of different deals that a property sourcer can pass on to an investor. This is why I think property sourcing is one of the harder ones, because it requires you to know a lot more, but that depends on if you are a broad sourcer or if you're very specialized on, say, rent to rents or lease options. So there's lots of reasons that somebody would deal with a property sourcer. I'm not going to bother listing them all, but things like they're in a chain and their last buyer has fallen through, so they just want to get rid of the property quick. They'd look for a deal sourcer, they'd drop the price a little bit. The seller knows that the deal sourcer has a large network of investors who are cash rich and ready to buy quick, so they'd offer a discounted price. The deal sourcer would pass that information on to all their investors, and the transaction could occur within a couple of weeks. So it's really beneficial for some people. As a deal sourcer, this requires you to be quite active. You need to be constantly looking for deals. You need to be online. You need to be meeting with agents. You need to be walking around and just seeing what's on the market. Dropping leaflets in houses. Are you looking to sell? Do you know anyone looking to sell? Just keeping your ear to the ground, looking for that next deal. You would also require a large network of investors. So that means building up quite a large network through networking at events, maybe a large email list. There's lots of ways to accumulate a large network, but that is necessary to become a successful deal sourcer. So like I mentioned, deal sourcing is quite an active role, but you sell a single deal a month, you're looking anywhere between £1,000 to £5,000 a month just on deal sourcing. So those are the three methods. They all require that you set up a company. I've set up a limited company. As you are technically operating similar to an estate agent or a property manager, you have to set up the company in a correct way, adhere to the correct SIC codes, which are 6 or 5-digit code that explain what your company does. I'll list the 3 above that I've set my company under. It depends on what you're doing as to what you need to set your company up. You need to do a little bit of research in that area. You'll also need to make sure you're compliant as a company. There's a checklist of things that you need to sign up to, memberships and insurances that you need to tick off to make sure you are covered. Just off the top of my head, you need to be a member of a redress scheme, also a National Landlord Association. So the one I'm part of is the NLA. You're going to make sure you have the correct insurance cover. You've got deposit protection schemes, anti-money laundering. These are just some of the lists. They'll depend on what strategy you take as to what you specifically have to do. So I recommend you do a little bit of reading on that. It's pretty easy to find that information online. Overall, you'll be looking at maybe £1,000 to £2,000 to become compliant in any of those 3 strategies. Property sourcing would then require very little capital after that. As you'd be compliant, you'd just be finding deals and pass them on. Rent to rent requires a little bit more upfront capital, as you'll need to pay rent, you need to pay your deposit for a property if need be. Lease options also similar, so when you do agree on a lease option, you have to pay a small transfer fee. It can be agreed, it can go down as low as £1, but generally you want to make it a little bit higher in a couple of thousands to show good faith. So those are the 3 strategies that are quite popular at the moment. They each have their pros and cons, depending on time, money, and effort that you're willing to put into your business. I've opted for the rent to rent, personally because I like the idea of being able to bring a product forward to customers, a good experience of being able to stay somewhere that's generally really nice. But if you like the idea of getting paid lump sum cash for your efforts, then perhaps property sourcing is more for you. It really depends on your circumstances and what you're into. Put in the comments below what it is you would choose as a method. Also, if you have any comments generally about the video, put them in the comments below. If you found the video interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to know more about everything wealth, please subscribe, and I'll be posting YouTube videos regularly. Until next time, bye.